Om Shanti, good afternoon and very warm welcome to this last session of the Churning and Writing Retreat. This is the 8th session as well. We have had 7 sessions so far, 3 sessions with spiritual resources and 4 sessions interactive already. And it has been a beautiful experience. We have received very nice feedback from many of you, and it has been almost 600 participants, some of them attending live and others watching afterwards. And it feels as if, as well as deepening churning and writing experience, also just the feeling of family gathering. So it feels so appropriate to have Sister Waddy with us this evening or this afternoon to continue to explore the topic. And Sister Waddy, she has been over 45 years with the Brahma Kumaris. And she's from Ireland originally, but living in Miami, and is the director of Brahma Kumaris in Florida. And when I was thinking about introducing Sister Waddy, I was thinking about her specialties. She has been in Iceland, and I've also met her many times in different places of the world. And I would actually like to read a few lines from today's Murli, because it felt so connected with Waddy Ben, and also because this is a Churning retreat, so that seemed okay. So Baba said in the Murli today, only those of the previous cycle recognize one another at this time, in this birth. You remember that you met one another 5,000 years ago in those same names and forms. You can say this at this time. You won't be able to say it in any other birth. All of those who become Brahma Kumars and Kumaris will recognize one another. And this felt so beautiful, and it felt so connected with Sister Waddy as well, because I feel really one of her main specialties is to recognize the specialties of others. And I've both seen it for myself, and I've seen it also with others, how she seems to just be able to look right into the soul and see aspects in others that they're not even aware of themselves, and really bringing to forefront the beauty of the soul. And that's so valuable. So I think she really feels like a friend to many of us, even if we may not know her that well, but she still feels like a close friend. So very, very warm welcome, Waddy. We look forward to listening to you. And maybe just to remind you that we have translations going on, so it's good if you can speak not too fast. And for anyone listening, you can put your questions at any point in the chat, and Caroline will be moderating in the middle of the session Q&A. So over to you, Waddy.
Thank you so very much. Yeah, today's Murli and Baba also mentioned, of course, caught my attention as it probably did yours, seeing as you've all been involved for the last number of days in churning. And Baba was saying that, you know, you shouldn't be able to sleep at night, that the churning should be such that there's intoxication, and for me, something that I live for and live on are realizations. And so I really related to that aspect in today's Murli. Now, I haven't listened to the sessions before. I heard a little bit, but I will go back and listen, because if I had listened to everybody else, then I would perhaps have thought, well, I can't mention that point because it's already been taken up. And so better that I just share what I've been churning. And the question of churning, I'm churning. That's what I've been doing for the last number of days, ever since I received the invitation. And it's an interesting word. And I don't know if other languages have had any difficulty in translating it into their language. Because on thinking about it, you know how some things become so much part of our language that we don't realize that it's not in common usage? Or as the daddies used to say, that sometimes they would hear these words like picnic, forgotten whatever else, and they would think that they were Sindhi words or Hindi words because they heard them so regularly. And so with this word to churn, that I'm not sure anyone else uses it in the same way that the BKs do in relation to the intellect. You know, I've heard of churn, of course, in terms of butter. It's a business term as well. And in fact, churn is both a verb, and those of you who are old enough, particularly I would think in Europe, you may remember that the container for the milk, this big metal container, like now they would call it a can, I presume, if it still exists, but it was also called a churn. And so churning it's more than just thinking about something, it's more than ruminating on something. And I would imagine that many of us who came to Baba or who have come to Baba, that churning brought us here. In other words, we had the questions and we thought about them and we looked for answers to them. But it was, as Baba once put it, like churning water. There was no result. And so then in coming to Baba, Baba gives us the milk. Now, the milk that Baba gives to us, we can't talk about it in terms of regular milk, I suppose, whether from the cow or from nuts or whatever else, but he speaks about the milk of the lioness. I mean, that's very, very powerful. That's not ordinary milk. And so he supplies the basic ingredient. And then the onus is on us to make it our own. And I think that's where churning comes in. This lovely expression, you know, God bless the child who has his own, or grind your own ingredients. And so it's like you take milk, whichever kind of milk, and look at the variety of things that you can produce from it, whether yogurt or ice cream or butter. There's a whole litany of things, ghee. And even though they're all very different in their composition and perhaps even in their application, their usage, but they have all come from the same milk. They've all been produced by the same source. And so always there's these two aspects that have been large in my Brahmin life, and that is the sameness. And in this context, the milk is the same, but then the uniqueness of each and every single individual in their application of it, or how they use or nurture themselves with that particular resource. And when it comes to churning, Baba doesn't talk about churning yoga. He doesn't talk about churning dharna or anything else, only knowledge, churning knowledge. And something I always remember Daddy Janki saying that if you're not using knowledge, if you're not using Gyan, then your sanskars are using you. And so all of the things that are accomplished in the process of churning, no doubt over these few days, you've got a whole list or litany of benefits that ensue from churning. And Baba, even though, and of course it would have been Brahma Baba, I think, who talked today about churning. And at the same time, as I come to realizations on the basis of churning, one of the things that always strikes me was that he knows, he knew this all along. And so it is very wonderful how he gives in such a magnificent way, but he does not do it for us. And of course, he tells us that if he did, then he would be the only one who would get the return. And so it's deepening the intellect, it's cleaning the heart, it's providing a source where not only the nutrition feeds yourself, but you can also share it with others. And so all of the other subjects are enhanced by one's churning, but so too, I think, are the mind, the intellect, the sanskars, even my physical sense organs, because I can listen to Gyan, but churning makes me hear Gyan. And so if I'm just listening, then sometimes what can happen is that I become a devotee, a Gyani devotee or Bhagat of Gyan. But as is remembered in the Bhagavad Gita, that the one most beloved of God is the Gyani Atma. And you cannot be a Gyani Atma without the process of churning. And of course, it's not that it's exclusive. You can't just churn and arrive at the destination, but rather it will influence, it will invite the yoga, the effect on relationships, all of those things. And so now, I'm sure some of you will relate to what I'm saying, knowing it as your own experience, but can I give you a methodology for it? I'm not sure that I can. And so I'm going back to a couple of things in my very, very, well, one in particular, early days. And it was such a simple thing. And it was our dear Siddhesh Didi, when I lived with her in Tennyson Road. And, maybe I would be driving her somewhere or would be in the car along with her, somebody else driving. And everything that she saw, even, the number plates on the car in front, she would turn it into Gyan. There would be that immediate transformation that she wasn't just seeing the registration number, but she saw, 5,000, it's the cycle, or 1,250, or even, more unusual than that somehow she had this wonderful tendency, which for me was a very important lesson in my very, very early days. So that was something. The other thing was Daddy Janki. Now, when it comes to churning, there are definitely master churners. I asked the class here the other day in thinking about this topic, how many of you consider yourselves to be churners, to be ones who churn? And one bright spark said, yes, we all are churners, but I don't arrive at the butter. So I think he was being a little funny, but I could understand what he was saying. And so with Daddy Janky, definitely a master churner. And what compelled her churning, I mean, two things, and I don't know if I would exactly put myself in the same category. Her love of Baba and her love of Baba's knowledge. And so for me, that love of knowledge above all, and in terms of the one who gave the knowledge, i.e. the teacher, you know, both those things. But Daddy had such an effect on me, and I would imagine many others as well. I used to say when I would come in contact in later years, not only at the time that I lived with her, but in later years, and rarely, you know, 3 to 4 months went by before I would have to go to wherever Daddy was. But just being next to her, it was like in the same way that the Murli will start the process, just being next to Daddy, that it's like all pistons were firing, and a way of thinking or questions would come into the intellect that maybe hadn't been there before. And then, of course, she being the master, you could instantly ask her the question and get a profound answer. And so for me, that's when the churning is in relation to someone else, and where it's almost automatic or spontaneous. And then I was thinking this thing of, you know, the sanskar, the deep sanskar of curiosity. And part of my churning once gave me the realization that my curiosity took me away from Satyug, from the Silver Age, but my curiosity also brought me back home again. And so questions, and not questions necessarily out of doubts, and not at all out of doubts, but the questions that, you know, and it's not that you're necessarily looking for a solution, because churning isn't necessarily about solutions, but definitely something would emerge. And it was almost like that with the churning, that something else came into, it allowed something else to come into expression, you know, that it could go from Baba's knowledge. So you have the pure knowledge, the original knowledge, but then by adding something that is of your own self, in terms of hopefully the purest part of your own self, or the most innocent part of your own self, that something is then expressed as a result of that. And sometimes one wonders, you know, because you may come up with things that you thought, wow, that's amazing. You've never thought about it before. You never gave it any consideration, and it just came, you know, because, and definitely, just like if you're churning butter or something else, always the important thing is that you have a clean vessel in which the process is carried out. And so there's a cleanliness of heart. So it's not necessarily it's not at all out of doubts, but that what Baba has given you, it's almost like, you know, adding yeast to flour and water, and it expands. And so there's sometimes this explosion, beautiful explosion. And it's in terms of a deepening of of ideas, and also a broadening of the heart itself. It's like the capacity. And so I sometimes see churning not so much about, you know, solution or resolution, but what's the word I can say? It's about finessing. It's about finessing Baba's Gyan, you know, and so sometimes, just like we know with milk itself, it can be a rich food with absolutely essential nutrition, and it can also be a dessert. You know, it can be ice cream. And so in the same way that sometimes there's like the awe of the power within something that has emerged, and then there's where it's much lighter and maybe even amusing, and at all levels, for me, it's pure entertainment, and not entertainment in a superficial way, but entertaining in an educational way, that this is sort of a given. And again, I was thinking about how in that vein, you know, that Socrates was known for his method of teaching, which was by asking questions. But here, Baba's already given us the answer first. We already have the answers. You know, it's just like, okay, day one, you're told you're a soul. There's the answer, you know. But then it's about the awareness, the attitude, the evolution. And it's like, you know, yeah, just the answer of the soul is truth. But no, just as a word, it's not truth. You have to make it your own. And then over time, that truth keeps changing. Not that the answer is ever anything different, but the experience and the expression and the awareness and the application is, of course, going to be different, is going to be more mature, is going to be much deeper. And you know, we also hear these things in the Murli, you know, Baba references. I'm thinking in particular for my own self, and this wasn't a question necessarily of doubts, but when I first came, and I'm sure there's some of you who had the same thing, I didn't find the golden age very appealing, you know, because I just saw it as the information that was given. You know, you'll be rulers and you'll dress like this and you'll be like that. And it was like, didn't resonate. But over the years, and not least with, you know, some time ago, and the exquisite expressions, it was called, that Petra and Trish and I think Judy from Canada had put together, that, you see, they were the instruments for my churning these things, just like you're the instrument for my churning. And in that process, in relation to Satyug, in relation to heaven, no, it was no longer that image of just Lakshmi and Narayan standing there in their regalia, in their full royal attire. But it's like one of the other things that's happening with churning, the memory, the ancient memory begins to re-emerge. And so it's dispelling all of the things that you had perhaps used before, misused even, or that was there in your getting or coming to Baba. And so then now it's not just about, okay, I can tell you things about the golden age. I haven't heard it in any Murli as such, but I haven't not heard it either. But it's something that it really is my experience. It's such a wonderful experience and way of seeing things. And I know that Baba knows all of this. Whatever it is I have ever churned or realized, Baba already knows it. And so then this is, where other people, one is just by their being, they will induce churning in me. They somehow get the intellect fired. And then others, all Baba's instruments, how we're all presenting these projects so that others can be benefited by them. And so my brothers and sisters become instruments for me to churn. And I think churning is, I live for it in a kind of a way. I live for realizations. And then a particular favorite is, and I'm not even sure if it's a churning process or if it's like, you know how again, you can, you're kneading the dough and you leave it alone and you come back a couple of hours later and it has risen to twice its size. And so sometimes in thinking deeply about things, as I say, it's not about a resolution, it's not about a solution. But then you sit in Baba's remembrance, not even particularly thinking about that thing anymore. You've kind of put it on the back burner or just stepped away from it. And then boom, it's like as if Baba just drops something into your head or into your intellect. And or again, as we know, that it will come in the Murli. And so this wonderful thing, I think it's something that people will talk about it in terms of synchronicity. And this thing which they also talk about of which we all like, I think. We know the supreme dot, that I'm a dot and that everyone else is a dot, but the expression that is used, joining the dots, and so not just the joining the dots in terms of souls, but connectors, how we connect things. And the dot may be the point or whatever it is, or maybe of 5,000 years ago or of 200 years ago. It could be to do with religions. It could be to do with history or geography, any of those things. And then you make the connection. So this thing, this entertainment of looking at and joining the dots. And so how, like with churning, it's like, you're almost as if you're massaging something into manifestation, and just like, again, we much prefer, we don't want the old yogurt that's been sitting for 4 or 5 days because now it feels a little bit too tart, but we want it fresh, that it has to be made, it has to be an ongoing thing. It can't just be once and done. but and even that which you had churned before and were satisfied with what emerged, you go back to that too, and something new, because you are constantly new. And your intellect is constantly being renewed. And so then the intellect that you give to that old point of knowledge will also emerge something new. And so just that thing sometimes of, and of course, it's all very much connected with the intellect, isn't it? And that idea of when Baba talks about churning the ocean, and the bhakti story of like, and the reason that they had to churn this cosmic ocean was because, I think it was Indra, I don't remember, but one of the gods and all of the gods had lost their power. They had lost their power. And so they had to churn the cosmic ocean in order to find, in essence, the nectar. And it was the nectar of immortality. But the interesting thing, and they used a mountain like we would use the stick, and they used a snake, and they had the devils on one side and the deities on the other side, and then not only did the ocean produce the nectar and the guarantee that whoever drunk of this nectar became immortal, but it also produced other things. And my understanding is that even Lakshmi appeared from there. Maybe she came with the trays full of jewels or whatever. And so for me, that one is what you would expect in the churning, but also, and I think it's a word we all love, the secrets that are also revealed, right? And in this way, and then it's why it's about coming to know Baba. He introduces himself the first day, the second day. But does that mean I know him just because he introduced himself? No. As he says, very few know me as I really am. And so it's a lifelong process in coming to know Baba as he is, and even in coming to know our own selves. And I think one of the things, and I think we're at time here, but is that you get to see, it's not always just the good things that emerge, but sometimes it's an awareness of, and especially if there's been, a situation, or I'm not pleased, or I'm in a bad mood, or I'm any of those negative connotations, then something's missing in my intellect. And just like, again, going back to the cake, or maybe, the yogurt, if you haven't put in the right thing, then the yogurt is not going to form. The milk will just stay as it is. And so it's finding if I'm unhappy, then there's something in my intellect that has not been folded in properly. I miss an ingredient in the cake, it's not going to rise, it's not going to bake properly. And so seeing the influence of my own sometimes bias, or even looking to see what my biases are, that churning can help me. So there has to be, I think, the cleanliness that's required is sincerity, that you sincerely want to be that image. And one further thing, and I think, please give me a signal if I'm way over time. One of the things that I didn't mention, and I find very fascinating, in terms of a use for churning, or a method maybe. you know, one of the first things Baba engages when we come to him is our imagination. So imagine you're a dot, imagine you're a point of light, imagine the soul world, imagine, it's all imagination, isn't it? You know, and that's what we're even accused of by some worldly people. But it's not imagination. You're using your imagination. Your imagination becomes a method, you know, to help you turn the stick, if you like, to agitate and emerge something. And then it becomes so real, so real. And in very practical terms, you know, all the things that Baba has told us. Look at the BK world today. Did he lie? Was it imagination? So you took those images and you become a huge nation, you know, and, you know, that's it. People walk into our centers. It's not their imagination, the vibration they feel, the people they meet. Yeah. And so to use your imagination as well, take it, let it take you there, let it take you there. So will we finish with that? Is that okay?
I'm actually deeply touched. I have a lot of feelings from all the images you shared, and I would like to use the moment of sharing a moment of silence, so we can have that sink in. Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you, Carla.
Om Shanti. The image which came to my mind in the moment of silence was like being in outer space, and all different images and analogies you mentioned were kind of came floating like a cake here, totally there in front of me. Also, I felt I was taken into a churning process very much, with that liveliness and that energy which is being created by churning. And I love the idea of what thinking of the realizations rather than like I have to churn or did I churn today? But it's like they say that if you want to teach people how to build a ship, you tell them about the open sea and create that love for the sea. And it's a bit, I felt a bit like that, you know, you say you live on realizations, like you live for that, you love that. And that's probably making you churn.
Probably.
Probably, or the secrets. Also, the different processes within the churning process, which you mentioned, I I had thought about the raising bread, you know, of the dough, sorry, the dough raising, but it's actually, as you said, if you leave aside for a moment what you have been thinking of and totally go somewhere else, that's when it still works in you, and suddenly you open the door and something completely new has happened. You don't know where it's coming from. Yeah. And also the awareness that Baba knows everything we're coming to. I opened the door into a room, Baba's already there. He knows it all already. And it's, in a way, you said God loves the churners, or the Jnani souls. It's the way to get close to him, I reckon. No? It's discovering his broad perspective, his unlimited presence. Very, very inspiring. Yes.
One very small thing, which also, in case it's useful for anyone, that facilitates or helps churning, and Baba, of course, has said it as well, is to sit in front of any of the pictures. You know,
Yes.
the Trinity or the tree, whatever, and you can't not churn looking at them.
And the presence of someone who is churning is so attractive, as you shared about being with Daddy. It's also, you cannot not follow her in a way, or follow that energy. Some comments and questions have come in. So Stefania is asking if you use writing when you churn as well.
Thank you. Sometimes, yes. And like, for instance, when I have to do a class or a session, then yes, that's when I would write, would be at that time. And sometimes too, when a realization has come, then I'll put it in my notes in my iPad and think, oh, this will be useful perhaps later on. But the funny thing is, I have many points that would have come up, but in another context, they're not the same. They were, when you have the realizations or the churning produces something, it's almost like it's sufficient to itself. And even though it's not untrue later on, but it's like somehow the fizz has gone out of it, you know, that you can then you're just giving it as a point. When you give it when it's fresh, but it's not to say that, you know, in your giving it, that others are going to receive it in the same way. I'm the one that gets most intoxicated by my churning rather than anybody else. But no, I don't have, and I know that I'm not so sure about Charlie. Did Charlie say that he writes? But of course, I know Judy's an excellent writer, as is Mike. It's his job. But
no, Charlie said he doesn't write so much.
No, I don't either. But I tell you what I do is, when I'm listening to the Murli, you know, when someone else is reading the Murli and I'm in the class, and it was the habit instilled when I started, it almost like verbatim, I'll almost write nearly every word. I like the process of writing. Wouldn't be the same for me to sit and type it, even though that was part of my job too, back in the early days in Tennyson Road when we started. You know, Sister Genti would translate the Murli from Hindi directly, and then we would record it on one of those old-fashioned tape recorders. And then there was a group of us in different places, sat at the old-fashioned typewriters with that big, what were they called, like for cyclostyling? You had those big strange things, and we used to type them. But for me, typing's not the same. It's the actual writing. And I'm struck very often, even in the class here, by how few students write. And I need to think about that. I'd be curious about it. I don't know what's your experience.
You mean
Why do
during the
people not
Merlin?
write? The Merlin, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Do you find that I don't imagine that it's just where I am. Do you find that less people take notes?
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah, I wonder why.
I don't know.
I wonder why. I like the pleasure of writing. And of course, you know, writing, certainly cursive writing has gone out of fashion. I don't even know if they're still teaching it in schools.
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah.
Probably, yeah.
Changes.
Waddy, here's a comment and question from Charumaru, London. She's referring to the picture which you shared, or the analogy from the scriptures. When the deities and the devils churned the ocean, first the poison came out, followed by jewels, and then the nectar came last.
And then the nectar, yeah.
And she
And
said,
of course,
yes.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
When I start to churn, I experience the poison coming out and feel so bad about the self and depressed that I stop. Has Sister Waddy got a yukti for me not to stop, but a way to continue the churning using another method so I can extract the batter from it? Wonderful question.
Oh, how amazing. And the story, as I recollect, it was Shiva who accepted, who took the poison, you know, so that others wouldn't be affected. But then I think, was it Parvati or who was it who, you know, so it only got as far as his throat or whatever. So in other words, it didn't go all the way down. I think just like with when it comes to churning butter, I think the cream rises to the top, and then what remains is probably the buttermilk, right? And so you may not have a use for the buttermilk, so you throw that away, but you're very aware of the cream. The same thing, like say, for instance, in the old washing machines, the top loading washing machines, that it's like in the spinning or whatever, that the dirt kind of separates itself from the clothes and everything, and is then taken out in the rinse, etc. And so it's part of the process. And so it's not about being afraid of it. That's the point, I think, where you have to be a little bit, it's easy to use the word detached, but it's more like, oh, look at this. And rather the gratitude, you know, that it is coming up. And so, like Baba was saying the other day, but not having fear, not being afraid of it. And that it was, as he says, it's not yours, right? That it's something that was that other person who you were before you came to Baba, right? And so in that way, being able to let it go, not to allow it to drown you or submerge you, or to stop the process of the churning. And you know, it's not even at that point for me, it's not even about churning so much. It's just about sitting with Baba. I'm not looking for a result from my churning, but it's just about being with Baba. And you know, whether the Father or whatever relationship that you want to have with him. Yeah.
I think I asked such a similar question to Judy, a bit different than Charumaru, but it's probably a similar challenge. When I see churning as in the ocean, it's quite moving, and you can really, like a swirl, is that the right word? Or like you can be drown into it.
Yeah.
Stuck, yeah. And for me, it was sometimes so many concepts emerged also from maybe work contexts, and so like theories and stuff, and so being taken away, that's also not helpful, or it becomes too complicated, rather than going into the simplicity, back into the simplicity. And I think Judy talked about how simple the daddies were also. It's not intellectual. It's different to the aspect of Charumaru, like the negative stuff coming up, but it's probably a similar question in the sense, what is my anchor? What keeps me anchored so that I'm not taken away by this amazing energy which can be released in churning, and you know, taken, yeah. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Well, one of the things for me is, as I say, it's about coming to know Baba, but it's also about coming to know yourself, warts and all. And I know I've shared this many times before. And my first experience of it when I went to live in Tennyson Road with Daddy and Sister Jenti and Sister Sudesh. And the realization of how I used to present myself with something as my quality, that this is what I am. And then coming to live with them, I realized it wasn't a quality at all. It was a front for something else. It was hiding something else. And this has happened many times on my journey. This is part of that process, as I say, where there's something in there that that you think is, or you've decided is true about you or whatever. And then you come to realize that it was really hiding something not so noble or not so charitable or whatever, but that was the way you dealt with it at that time. You couldn't look at it, you couldn't face it. And so you had to put something, you know, put on the makeup, the gloss and the shadow and everything else, so as you didn't have to look at that thing. And for me, when that happens now, and it still does, it's such a relief. It's such a release. And the only thing I can do is laugh about it. And even to the point of where, look, here's how I presented myself. This is my quality. This is who I am. And Baba gave me a realization of that too, even in a personal meeting. You know, when he told me once, this is what you need to learn to do. And I'm almost taken aback and thinking, but this is my quality. And then realizing when I went back over that year, it was not your quality, it was hiding something else. And then when I went back the following year, I wasn't even thinking about it. And in those days, this would have been in the meditation hall. And when we came, we were allowed to go and take Toli. We may not have been meeting Baba personally. And I went to take Toli, and then Baba said, you have learned to blah, blah, blah. You've learned to do this thing, which, you know, last year I told you you needed to work on. And so again, what is my commitment to truth? Is this not why I'm here? What is the essential thing Baba's giving us? We say knowledge. It's truth. And what is it that we have to become? True. The true image, you know. And so in other words, it's like as if you're saying, I can't afford this truth. I can't afford it. I don't have enough strength or love to wrap around it, you know. And so what are you willing to do for truth? And it's about the truth of you, isn't it? And so those little things that are going to come up, and again, not to be dismayed by them. And they're, as Baba tells us, they're not coming up to submerge you or sink you. They're coming to take leave. And they have to. And so right at that moment, you've had situations where, you know, maybe you've worked on something for a long time, and really destiny is saying, okay, now is the moment when we will allow her to release it. But that's the moment you turn and go back in the other direction, you know. And so is that clear? Is it clear what I'm saying or not?
I'm thinking about it. I'm with the last point, going back into the other direction.
Yeah, where you're just about to, something is about to release.
Mm-hmm.
It's about to leave you.
Mm-hmm.
And you've struggled with it, you've worked with it and everything else. But at that very moment, when destiny has more or less said, okay, you pass, but at that very moment, instead of taking that one step into the light, you decide it's too much. I'm out of here. I'm gone.
Okay. Yes. Yes.
And the point for me is the main point for me is like, it's not always about struggling for what I have to become, or it's who I am now. This is what has to be loved. This is what has to be accepted. This is what has to be acknowledged. And if you're not doing it for yourself, you're not going to do it for others either. You're going to expect them to be further on than what they are, more of this or more yoga or more service or whatever. And so is that the truth of the thing? I don't think so. And so I think it's that thing of like, just like as I was kind of inferring earlier on, that the churning is in the present, the churning, and then how nothing to do with what we're talking about, but you know, it's what you're thinking in the present that even affects your subconscious. You know, the subconscious is of the present. And so, like, what are you feeding the subconscious as well? And so churning is something that's giving your you know, you're not thinking in terms of the deity you're going to be. In that moment, I am that. That's who I am. You're able to envisage yourself. You're able to have the feelings and the expression and the experience. You know, you mentioned about, you know, being up there and kind of in space, that you're there. It's not something about, oh, when I get there, you are there, you know. And so this, for me, part of a commitment, just that acceptance of my own self, where I'm at this moment.
Mm-hmm.
Not there's a lovely line, now you've seen the weakest me and not the me I'd like to be, or rather not the me I'm going to be, you know. And so if other people can have love for me in my incomplete state, even now, you know, then can't I do it for myself too? Knowing that the other, the rest will be added on to me, now is not the time. In fact, this was a question that I asked everyone on Sunday, was like, what is their key word? What will be the word going into this new year? And for me, it was completion. I mean, I don't know what it means. I don't know what it means or how it will manifest, whether it's a physical thing, a spiritual thing, an intellectual thing, a relationship thing, no clue. But just, okay, there's the word. Now let's see what happens. Yeah. So it's about, it seems almost silly to say, but that thing of being kind of kind with your own self.
Absolutely. I can connect to that a lot. To love myself in whatever state I am is
Whatever
so
state you're
important.
in. Yeah. Because Baba won't love you when you're a deity, will he? I mean, not you won't need it. You know, Baba loves us in despite our imperfections, right?
Absolutely. Waddy, here I have a few more questions we would like to put to you from the group. Here's a very different topic: how to avoid a religious devotee attitude towards Murlis and Gyan. How to avoid to take dreams for reality. Example, is not possibly the ego that affirm and assume it for granted. I am completely egoless. The thought for today from the Silence Project is I am completely egoless, and I think she's referring to that. Isn't it? Can it not also be ego to reaffirm that I assume and take that for granted, and that devotional or devotee attitude, religious attitude towards Murlis? Can you say something about that area?
That thing of I am egoless, it's almost like egoless is almost like a negative. And in a kind of a way, one thing is to say I am humble, but for me it would simply be I am. If I say I am, what can emerge from that? If I say I'm egoless, there's going to be another little voice in there saying, no, you're not. Or even to say I'm humble. But just the power of Om, I am. And don't you feel instantly content with that? Don't you feel the ripeness, the fullness of that?
Definitely feels grounding.
Yes, yeah, it's just that I am. And then whether it follows with, I have a right to be here, I have a part in the drama. I don't think a great deal of discernment is needed to know when you're being sincere, when you're being authentic. And if you're not sure about it, then either maybe you have someone who can help you to discern, or even if you're not ready to ask, then sometimes the feedback that you just automatically get from other people in their responses to you, will allow you to see that. And as for the devotional aspect, it's an interesting thing for Churning too. I don't think that that I have very much of the devotee in me, and that was what made Gyan so very attractive. Having been brought up traditionally in a religion which served me very well, and in fact is a wonderful. I'm so glad that I had that education to now present Gyan, not by way of contrast, but sometimes just in understanding, what the prophets were saying or what this religion was saying. But, and again, this understanding yourself, very often my questions will be in terms of like two polarities in a sense. And so we come to Baba, and some, just recently I was asking, and you can only have a one word answer. Are you the theologian or are you the mystic? Are you the philosopher or are you the devotee? Which are you? And at one level, I'm all of those things. I'm all of those things. One will always be predominant, but we need both things. But the devotee here for me is about bhavna and is about love, not blind faith. That for me would be the distinction. There's nothing blind, and it's not my way of seeing the Murli. Of course, not every Murli is going to be the same. There'll be things, sometimes you will know that this Murli or this thing in the Murli was just for me. It was just for me. And other times you'll read the Murli and you have to have a bigger consciousness in that Baba's not just talking to you. You're not the only one he's talking to. He's not just talking to Hindus, he's talking to Jews and Muslims and Buddhists and everybody else too. And so that, what may not be touching me is absolutely that the other person will say, oh, that Murli was just for me, whereas you didn't find it. So to know, again, then putting yourself, one thing is in front of Baba, he's teaching me. And the other thing is put yourself beside Baba, and where together you're expressing this aspect or this point of knowledge or this understanding, so you don't need to hear it as a student, but you're watching Baba and you're seeing the souls responding to it from their life's or religious experience. We're over time.
We don't want to stop, so it has been so enjoyable and really inspiring, this session, really.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. Thank you very much.
I hope we can continue some other time. And someone was asking in the chat, like, when is the next, such opportunity, such retreat? And I think we are already having some thoughts about how to keep the conversation and exploration going. So, let's see. Yeah.
But for sure, you can't, you would think after all these hours that you've spent that everything that could be said about churning has been said. And of course it hasn't. No. Fresh energy will be brought to it by you and by someone else the next time, and we'll be listening with different ears that are a year older and wiser, right?
Exactly. That was such a nice point that you were also bringing up, how the yogurt needs to be fresh or the food needs to be fresh. So it's the same. Yeah. It's like coming back to it. So yeah, it was really wonderful. Yeah. So we would like to, if you would guide us, take us into a meditation, Waddy, just with a few thoughts, and to guide it with words. And then after that, as this is the last session of the retreat, after you have guided us into meditation, we would like to stop the recording and for everyone to put on gallery view and just finish with one happy song together to celebrate.
Oh, how nice.
Being together.
Can we take a picture of the gallery view? Can we take a picture, or would that not be permissible?
I think only use it in-house. Yeah, maybe the TAC team can take a picture and yeah, okay. Yes. But first, a few words, first a guided meditation with you, with some
Sure,
words, and then
sure.
we end with a happy moment together. Thank you.
And the heart gives thanks. To the one who provides the support, who knows the amount of support required for my progress. And in that, a confidence comes. Faith too. And the questions of security are dispelled. The heart of that one is so vast. And his invitation first as a reminder, you're my child. Be next to me. And immediately, the feeling of belonging. No separation. And further, I find myself in front of him. And he's now my teacher. And he says simply, I'm teaching you to remember. Remember time. Remember yourself. Remember me. And then as the Satguru, he turns me around. And he stands behind me. And whispers, the world will see you. Before they see me. And his light is so radiant that it allows me also see all the other souls reflected in his light. As the Satguru, the truth, as the teacher, wisdom, and the beloved parent, only love. Om Shanti.
Om Shanti, thank you so much. It would be great if everyone would put their gallery view on, and we can stop any recordings and just enjoy a moment together, a moment of happiness.